Hey everybody, and welcome to another Watchmen Tower Babel breakdown. My name is Dan D'Souza. I'm joined by Jeremy Kozier.
Hello.
And what we're going to be doing today is breaking down episode 2 of HBO's Watchmen series, The Martial Feats of Comanche Horsemanship. It's quite a mouthful.
What does that mean?
I have no idea. Like, it's obviously referencing the painting that we see in the episode.
Right.
I don't know how it applies to this episode.
I looked it up, so when
Okay,
we get there, we'll explain what
Okay,
that means.
sounds good. So yeah, what we're going to be doing is kind of going scene by scene, asking a lot of questions. The show kind of begs a lot of questions. Before we get into that, I just need to quickly remind you to follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. With that being said, sort of maybe general impressions, Jeremy, what did you think of the episode?
Again, just more questions being posed. I like where it's going. You know, the conspiracy of the whole thing. What we learn about Will, Angela, the White Knight. I think I enjoyed the first episode, the pilot, a bit more.
Right.
Um, but yeah, at the end of this episode, I'm just like, what the hell's going on? But I like having that kind of feeling at the end of these episodes.
Right. Yeah, it's tough because the pilot was such a strong episode. So this is going to feel like a slight lull in comparison. I don't know that I love the way that this episode was put together as much. The pilot flowed very smoothly for me, and this one less so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Um, anyways, let's get started with the first scene. It kind of opens in Nazi Germany, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I guess another, prominent historical event in the real world, and we kind of learn the origin of the paper, the note that says "Watch over this boy" that Will, still has to this day, which we learn the old man in the wheelchair
Right.
still has. So, kind of showcases the German army kind of trying to persuade the soldiers of color to kind of turn on the Americans, by telling them the truth that they know is kind of happening around them, with the segregation between white and black, and
Right.
we kind of see that with the white soldiers spitting on Will's father, and then we get a cool transition. Uh, once I guess they show Will as a young boy kind of trying on his father's outfit, and that's where he kind of finds the paper.
Mhm.
And then we transition to present day to the end of the last episode where Will is, sitting in the wheelchair next to Judd Crawford, who he, describes to Angela that he did kill.
Right.
And then we get that kind of scene, that kind of confrontation with Angela and Will back at the bakery.
Right.
And yeah, just, all the questions we would probably ask, and we get kind of the runaround and kind of some silly answers.
Well, he makes a point of saying that he can't reveal everything all at once because it's a conspiracy so vast it would blow her mind.
Right.
Uh,
But even, proclaims that he's Dr. Manhattan, and she kind of throws that to the wayside pretty quickly. So it's like he's kind of having fun with it a little bit, playing with her a little bit. We learn that he's got some pills for his memory loss that he kind of has.
right.
We learn that he's 105 years
105 years
old.
old, he's going to need those pills. That's only natural. Yeah, there's something about him. Clearly, we're not going to get those answers right away. He's obviously involved with a larger group, and something insidious that he's been up to.
Maybe. Do you think he has superpowers like he says? Do you think he's psychic?
No, I think
No?
not. I think they're going to keep it relatively grounded.
You don't think there's anything special about this boy?
I think they want us to think that.
Yeah.
But much like the original, like the source material, there aren't really any superheroes other than Dr. Manhattan. He's
Right.
the outlier, right? Everyone else they're just people with psychological problems that do these things.
And that is known. I just think the potential for that to be there, it is kind of there just based off that note, right? Like, why watch over this boy? Why does he still have this note? What does that mean?
Yeah, I guess like so you can interpret that as just a father trying to protect his son,
Mhm.
or that there's something special about the boy.
Right.
It's not even clear whether or not that's his dad. We're all assuming that. They don't
Yeah.
really, explicitly say that.
And then there's a lot of fan theories that Will could be hooded justice. Do you see that at all?
I can definitely see that, and I 100% think that he has sort of a sordid past that we'll learn about later on.
Oh yeah,
He's
100%.
he's an important historical figure in some capacity, and
Right.
important in relation to the heroes and in relation to the Minutemen and the Crime Busters.
Hmm.
I don't know how, I don't know in what capacity that is. It may be as hooded justice. I can definitely see that.
And then kind of skipping ahead, we get a we get a kind of an intro to the American hero story, which is kind of focusing on hooded justice to begin with.
Right. Because he was the
Um,
first.
right. Um, and yeah, just since we're talking about that part there, it's interesting to note that basically everyone in America like tunes in. They kind of show that by even showing Looking Glass kind of, eating dinner, and weirdly enough, still with his mask on, kind of half up,
Right.
which was, I think, definitely a callback to Rorschach, kind of that scene when he's eating the beans when he's
Yeah.
talking to Dan Dryberg again for the first
Yeah.
time.
Human bean juice.
Right.
Right.
And again, the American hero story is basically the comic within a comic, like the Black Freighter from the original. And I just think it's a really cool idea to kind of have this drama documentary series that depicts like the first ever superhero team, which was a really cool part of Watchmen. And I just really like that we're able to kind of dive back into that world and explore it more.
Yeah. It's one of those things when reading the books, as you know, between chapters of the books, there's often tags.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's from Under the Hood, the
Yeah.
Hollis Mason book. Sometimes it's, the U.S. government psychological profile of Dr. Manhattan, whatever. But there's a lot of Easter eggs. There's a lot of important information in
Hmm.
those. I think the first time I read the book, I maybe read about half of those, and then I got kind of bored. Like there's one.
Yeah, I think we shared that where we're kind of like we wanted to just get on with the
Yeah,
story.
exactly.
But as it went on, we really appreciated those moments in between that extra backlog of story that really gave you like just more about the world that
Yeah.
and made it make more sense.
And having recently reread it, there's a lot about hooded justice in there, not just at the beginning, but all the way through to the end. There's a lot of questions being asked, and again, we're jumping ahead here.
Yeah,
But
we'll get back.
speaking of the bodybuilder, they
Mm.
deliberately show him dead, and it's kind of played off like either he was trying to get them off his scent, hooded justice was trying to get them off his scent somehow, or that was the real guy and he was murdered
Yeah,
by the
so in
comedian.
the comic that they basically say he was murdered or whatever, but here in this sequel to the comic, Damon Lindelof has pretty much wrote in that he did what you said. He kind of faked his own death
Right.
to become Hooded Justice. So I think that's pretty cool that we have like this new like in canon answer to Hooded Justice kind of story.
Hmm.
Um, and then again, like the way they depict him, right? He's clearly a white man behind the hood. So the theory about Will and him, that maybe uh, just kind of putting that off a little bit, but we don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, other superheroes put like makeup on their
Right?
face.
Yeah, yeah.
It could still be Will. And then that
Kind of
could,
like Angela, we get that cool scene where she kind of spray paints her eyes there.
yeah, impossible to get it that straight the way
Yeah.
that she's doing it. But whatever, that's not important. It's nitpicky.
So then, anyways, after Angela has the confrontation with Will and kind of locks him up uh, in the bakery, she goes to the crime scene where Red Scare is, Looking Glass is, and her and Looking Glass have kind of a weird conversation because it's kind of like they're without their leader to a certain
Hmm.
degree, and they don't really know how to act. And Looking Glass is kind of suspect
Yeah,
of Sister Night a little bit, and she kind of senses that.
and this scene, I think it was already the case. I think Looking Glass was already my favorite character from the first episode.
Yeah, it's
But
very
but
interesting.
this scene for sure sealed it. That was really cool.
What do you make of him? Like, I guess Sister Night basically calls him like a cold bastard or something like that, or like accuses
Mhm.
him of being really cold. But he says, then how come I'm crying under this mask? Do you think? What do you think of that line? Like, do you think he is crying under that mask?
Probably not literally. It
No.
doesn't. I think he's just trying to explain to her that as much as he's being analytical right now, he still cares about what happened. But that's just that he's a detective, and that's how
Right.
he works. And to be fair, she is kind of hiding something, so he can sniff that out pretty
Right. Yeah, that's
readily.
true.
She chose not to call it in. She's pretending that it's her first time on the scene.
Hmm.
She didn't tell anybody about Will.
But
Uh,
she's being relatively open with him. She
yeah.
says he was on blow, drunk, all those types of things.
Mhm.
Then just before that, actually, we get a cool kind of throwback to the newsstand of the original comic on our way to the crime scene, where we see the newspaper, the New Frontiersman, the paper that ran Rorschach's journal, and the headline is "Global Squid Falls Baffle Scientists." So a little callback to the first episode of the Squid Rain,
Right.
which I guess the general public still have no idea why this is happening, just like we did when we
Yeah,
first saw it.
yeah. It's just a reminder that there's transcendental or transdimensional squid out there
Right.
theoretically, even though I think we all know that it is a hoax, that it
Mhm.
is perpetrated.
And I think the banter between the people at the newsstand are talking about how they think Redford is behind the squids somehow. I guess that's cluing us into something later on. Kind of just government conspiracy, political stuff, hiding things.
Yeah, that's one of the main like factors of the source material that I found so interesting is that there's these sidebars between the newsmen. Like you mentioned, the Black Freighter, that's a huge one. Often, what's happening on a panel within the Black Freighter comic relates to the
Right.
Watchmen world, and
Right.
it's there's a lot of crossover there, and it makes it really interesting to read it and recognize that. And the same thing happens with with the newspaper man in the comic.
Hmm.
And I imagine they're going to do something similar, like you said, instead of the Black Freighter, it's going to be
Right.
the American Hero story.
Right.
So in this episode of the American Hero story, it's Hooded Justice, but it's really speaking kind of I would say about Sister Knight's character, but
Oh,
where how she
100%.
feels.
Because even when she leaves the bakery and she puts on the paint, they do a nice close up of her like literally putting the hood on,
Right.
and it's definitely close up of like the hand on the hood. So I thought that was pretty clever. And then we get a pretty important scene. We get a flashback of the White Knight, which we've heard about only in one episode so
Yeah.
far, but it just seems like these events are so, infamous, I guess.
It's a little quick. I imagine that this was going to be later in the series, but right now they're really exploring Sister Knight's character.
Right.
So I guess we're leaning into that.
Yeah. So then here we have Angela and her husband kind of dancing as what is it, like 5 minutes to midnight,
Mhm.
typical stuff. Her husband just wants to open this gift. She's saying, hold on, you got to wait. And then she hears something and then just knows someone's in the house. While this is happening, this a slow rendition of Santa Baby is playing, which as I was watching, thought it really reminded me of Zack Snyder's movie. The intro when the comedian is being murdered, they have that slow, unforgettable song. So I thought that was kind of a cool, similarity.
Right.
And then a Seventh Cavalry member kind of busts in. The White Knight, obviously. Um, this is, I guess, the last time the cavalry kind of had their major confrontation.
Yeah, something along those lines. I think this is what their coordinated attack. I think you
Right.
said against 40 different police officers.
Yes, 40 targeted that night on Christmas Eve. And then due to the attack, apparently a lot of officers resigned. Um, but here we see this action sequence play out really cool. She pushes her husband out of the way. She rolls, backwards to the Christmas tree, pulls out the light, which is really cool because it
Mhm.
makes it all black. So then the the masked man can't really see what's going on.
Yeah, she's just operating on instinct, and
Yeah. Oh
she's
yeah.
like Jason Bourne there.
Very cool. And then she stabs him, basically kills him, but then there's another one in the house, and then boom, shock into the stomach. That's why we learn she can't get pregnant. And then the scene literally ends with that assailant kind of, pointing the gun right at her face, and then it just ends. And then we see her waking up in the hospital. I think it's 3 days later, something like that, with Judd Crawford sitting there, also kind of injured. He's in an arm sling. So then they talk about how, yeah, the coordinated attack, and they both basically say, they're not leaving. That's kind of when they form their bond.
Right, because at this point, this is before the masks have been introduced to the cops. So,
Right.
so there would be a transitionary period where they know criminals have their addresses and can have the ability to target them, and then they choose to be police anyways.
So, and then while this is happening, what do you think? How do you think that scene on the White Knight for Angela ended?
I, yeah, he's got a gun to her head. She
Yeah.
should be dead.
So we're either left to believe that her husband maybe kind of because he wasn't like he just got pushed out of the way, right? Was kind of
Yeah,
hiding, or was Judd there, right? Because later on we'll talk about it. Judd may have have heavy involvement in just kind of how that event played out. Maybe being closely tied to it, as we'll
yeah, it
discuss
may
later.
be. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But it could be that Judd was involved. So maybe he didn't want her killed, and only some of the other cops killed. It's hard to say.
I think it's safe to say that we might revisit
Yeah,
that scene and just kind of they will show what happened there
The
if
thing
it
is,
is, especially if it is Judd. I
yeah,
think.
the thing is, if it's her husband that's saving her in that moment, why hide it? Why not just show it right then and there?
And we wouldn't go back to it
Yeah,
too. So
yeah.
yeah.
So they're deliberately withholding some piece of the story there, and then we'll get back to it later.
Right. And then I guess we have a scene where the officers kind of raid the motorhome area where I guess a lot of the cavalry members might be
It's yeah, it's
living.
Nixonville. They have that
Nixonville,
giant
right? We have that
statue of Nixon.
yeah, which is obviously because of the original comic, Nixon. Uh, he had multiple terms, which has never happened before.
He was the second president. 'Cause in our history in real life, there's only one U.S. president that's had 3 terms, and it's FDR.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes,
And that's only because it was wartime.
right.
So in the Watchmen comic, Nixon becomes the second president who will be elected to a third term,
Right.
and I
Because
think
he
it's
was
because of the war, the Vietnam War.
right with Doctor Manhattan being their secret weapon. So I think it was in power for I guess basically 20 years, something like that.
The third term would make it 12 years at
12
the
years?
minimum. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know what the canon is for that.
Right.
Maybe he had a fourth term. I don't remember.
So then either way, it's just kind of a weird scene where clearly the cops are flustered and they want revenge, kind of right away. Obviously this wasn't the best move to pull off. What did you think of this scene?
Well, yeah, this is Red Scare. They're being reactionary, right?
Yeah.
They know they've always known that members of 7K live in Nixonville, so now they're just rounding everybody up.
7K, I like the abbreviation there. Did anybody else use that one?
Yeah, it was in the first episode. No, actually no, I coined it.
I
Never
did?
mind.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all me.
See, way easier to say.
Yeah, it's just them. It's a commentary on police brutality. I think a lot of this show in general is.
Yeah.
And how police being human may overreact to a situation.
Yeah.
In this case, these guys, they're the bad guys. The Nixonville, the 7K, they are the bad guys. It's clear that they're just being targeted.
Yeah.
There's some analogs to our world in that sense.
Right. Oh, 100%. And it's a cool little section of that scene where Sister Night says this is what'd she say? It's like over the top or something to that effect, and then she gets attacked,
Yeah,
and then she beats this guy like way more than
mercilessly.
she should.
Yeah.
So that's a reaction.
So she's also acting
Yeah.
Emotionally, but her and Looking Glass are the only ones that are able to kind of take a step back and think about the bigger
Mhm.
picture here. Whereas Red Scare is just he's just looking for revenge. He just wants to flex on people.
Right. And then we move on to the Greenwood Center, which is basically a memorial area for those that died during the real world attack of
The
from
Tulsa.
the Tulsa massacre from the opening of the pilot. As Angela's going up, we see protesters outside. So clearly, people are kind of against this, obviously, because it's an advantage for the people who were affected by it because it was such a traumatic event that affected the timeline of these families.
Yeah, it's
and
generational trauma.
right, and we learned that's what the Redfordations are, a way to compensate these people. And I guess at this Greenwood place, you can kind of get DNA tested to see if you are eligible for the Redfordations. And Angela does a pretty slick move by taking the coffee cup that she gave Will to kind of use that DNA. And
It's pretty crazy to think that she was like carrying it around in her purse the entire day. Like she went to that thing.
yeah,
At
just like in her
Nixonville.
bag. And it's like a funny cup too, right? It doesn't say like number, like one of those like
I don't
world's
remember.
greatest moms or
Yeah,
whatever.
something along those lines.
Oh, and then did we mention too in the White Knight that's why her kids are white? She adopted her.
Oh, right, yeah. In that scene, they reveal that her partner died
right.
in the White Knight. And I think they mentioned Topher. They mentioned
Mm.
the eldest. The other two are just babies at the time. But we learn that she and Cal decided to foster them and
Right.
take them under their wing. And
So we get that question answered. And then I don't remember when the scene was, but there's a scene where she talks to the oldest son. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah. And basically, saying that Judd is dead, and he's playing with like these. I think there's a name for it. It's on the side. Do you remember? Did you see the name?
I didn't see the name, but it's like
It's definitely a Dr. Manhattan like magnetic block thing.
some sort of thing. It's some like
Yeah.
hoverboard,
Mhm.
3D puzzle.
And again, it's in the shape of a castle. So we see
Right.
these castle things from the first episode where Dr. Man is on Mars, and you see this castle being built
Yeah.
and destroyed, and then obviously Ozymandias at his
Yeah,
castle.
and so the trend there is building up these walls and then having them crumble, right? For both of
Right.
those. So I don't know if that's hinting at something. Um
I would assume so.
yeah, so that scene is interesting. She kind of reveals a bit of her worldview. She kind of expresses to her child that
Yeah.
that we view the world in black and white. There's good and there's bad,
Hmm.
which again is very reminiscent of Rorschach.
Yeah.
That's huge to his character. You know, even the mask itself being both white and black and never mixing. Like he doesn't
Hmm.
believe in the gray area. And so she also kind of views the world in those extremes
Right.
and is teaching her child to do the same.
And then we have Judd Crawford's wake or memorial. Um, and here Angela goes there, just kind of, supporting Judd, just as herself, right?
But with an
And
ulterior motive as well.
yes, and I guess the key standout here in the beginning there is that we meet Senator Joe Keene, which is clearly the son of John Keene, who proposed the Keene Act, which was in the original graphic novel, which outlawed vigilantes and made the Watchmen go into hiding. So,
Mhm.
and he's like talking with Judge's wife and stuff. So it's very weird that the kind of the opposition to Redford is kind of there.
Is
You know what
that
I
is
mean?
that what we're
That's what I kind of take from it. You know what I mean? Because like Joe Keene
yeah.
would have been running against Robert Redford.
Is that okay?
That's what I don't know. That's how I kind of
Could
read
be it could be the
Yeah.
case. I don't know what their political affiliation is. It hasn't really been made clear yet. Um, but
But
yeah,
they were
it
just definitely key role in the Keene Act for sure.
in outlawing
In outlawing vigilantes.
masks.
Yeah.
And then in this conversation, he speaks to Angela as though she is. Like, he
Mhm.
knows that she is a masked,
Right.
basically a vigilante, although
Which is
albeit
definitely a personal
sanctioned.
question too that you can't
Yeah,
really you shouldn't be asking. You know what I
especially
mean?
among all those other people. And she
Right.
she plays it off. She's practiced. She's like, I used to be a cop. I'm not a
Yeah.
cop anymore. Blah blah
She's
blah.
a baker.
Yeah.
And then she pulls a slick move again. She faints or something like that, right? And then so then the wife kind of puts her upstairs in the bedroom, exactly where she wants to be. She pulls out these owl like or night owl like night vision goggles.
Yeah, so this is the second time that we've seen Night Owl's technology being used by the police force
Right.
in Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
So I
With
either
Archie in the first
exactly
episode.
Archimedes. So it's safe to assume that technology in New York was taken and sort of used and distributed to police forces.
Mhm. Also, in the beginning, when they go back to the crime scene, we get this kind of cool drone like thing where these guys
yeah.
using Mothman like wings, kind of a throwback to Minuteman,
Right.
and they're like shot down and they're trying to film things and
The
whatnot.
paparazzi.
Yeah. So, and here's the big reveal. She finds a KKK outfit with a badge on it in Judd Crawford's closet.
Right. That sheriff badge on a Klan
Yes.
robe.
So, Will even said like he's got skeletons in his closet, and we didn't
Yeah.
think we'd basically literally see that. So what do we think here?
Yeah.
Is he a member of the cavalry? Is it a family members? There was that picture of him and his dad. We think that is kind of
Either
ominous,
dad or grandfather.
right?
Um,
Is it a way to infiltrate the Seventh Cavalry secretly on his own? You know what I mean?
yeah. So okay, we're into theories now. It could be the case that he's just hiding his grandfather's past. He's maybe ashamed of it. I think it's likely that robe and maybe the grandfather were involved in the Tulsa massacre. That's one way to interpret it. The other way, I think you're leaning towards him infiltrating the cavalry.
I haven't made up my mind. I just know that there's so many questions you can pose here. I just don't know which lane to go down.
So here's what I'm gonna say. Much like in Watchmen, much like Ozymandias' decision to murder millions to save billions,
Mhm.
right? The greater good, sort of
Yeah.
Machiavellian. I think Crawford organized the White Knight to enable police force to give them that extra power,
Leverage.
right? So once that happened, they were able to implement the vigilante system. They were able to use masks, and they were probably given more power, at least for a little bit.
Mhm.
So I think he may have been instrumental in organizing that to bolster the police force. So it may have been one of those things where he has good intentions, but he
So do you think he's working with Ozymandias then? Like,
I
how
don't know
does
if
he
I don't.
fit into it right
Yeah,
now?
well, it's really unclear how he fits in because his stuff has been so separate.
Yeah.
Um,
And then we get a real kind of close up shot of the painting, which is in reference to the title here,
mhm.
of these horses, and apparently it's a military tactic that what this painting is depicting in that name
Okay,
of kind of hiding behind your horse and then coming up around the other side and then attacking.
okay,
So then the theory there is that maybe Judd is kind of using that tactic or even will to a certain degree,
right.
kind of, you know what I mean? Like
No,
playing one way and then attacking another,
yeah,
or using something to, protect yourself and then attacking.
you're right.
Um,
I'm trying to like that's interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. I'm trying to
yeah,
think about how that fits with
right.
either of their strategies.
Hmm.
But they choose these titles for a reason.
Oh yeah, 100%. I like how they're pretty over the top.
Yeah, like I had a hard time pronouncing it
Yeah.
at the beginning of the episode. It's just a lot to
Yeah.
say.
And then I guess now here we get a transition of Ozymandias riding a white horse.
Mhm.
So we get another scene with him. This one I find far more interesting than the previous.
Yeah,
Um,
much more information. It's still very much separate from everything else. It's very much a change of pace.
right. And before we kind of get into it, he's riding the horse, and then he goes up to a tree, right? And it turns out to be this giant tomato tree.
Which tomatoes typically don't grow on
Right.
trees.
So I think for me, this is kind of just alluding to the fact that he is, somewhat of a scientist and experiments with a lot of things, especially going back to the original Watchmen, where he kind of orchestrated the alien squid with his team.
There's that. He also has
Um,
Bubastis, the genetically engineered lynx, right?
right, exactly, and then to go off what we learn in this episode of his servants clearly being clones here, as we see
Right.
multiples of them, just to kind of compare it to the Doomsday Clock comic book, which is the literal comic book sequel to Watchmen, but kind of fits in the DC super world. And there, I believe he clones
Yeah,
Bubastis.
he's got a little kitten Bubastis.
Right.
And I
So
think in the comic that kitten has like psychic powers or something crazy like
yeah.
that.
So again, that's definitely disconnected from this, but it's just not out of the realm of possibility of his experiments and cloning and all that stuff.
Yeah, so like his power is that he's the smartest man in the world.
Right.
Always has been. And he's sort of like when we talk about Batman, when we talk about DC, Batman's supposed to be like the peak human. He's
Right.
incredibly smart and also peak physical condition. I think Ozymandias in his prime was like that.
Hmm.
Batman, or just a human in peak physical and mental fitness, but he had a Machiavellian worldview, a little bit more cold, calculated, and it's almost like he sees he's above the rest of the world. He doesn't see himself as part of the world.
Right.
Um, I honestly, I'm having a hard time understanding what to make of his scenes, both of these episodes.
Yeah. So here we learned that we kind of go off the last episode of the play that he was talking about, the Watchmaker's Son, and he's using his servants as actors in this play. And this play is literally about Dr. Manhattan, John Osterman, and his kind of origin in turning into
Right.
Dr. Manhattan. So we see it play out. It's very funny because it's just run like a high school play. We see a blue dick,
Yep.
which is
That's
common
classic Watchmen.
Watchmen. And he even kills one of them. Just kind of like what happens to John Osterman, right? When he gets trapped,
pretty
in the-
gruesomely.
yeah, burned alive. And here, I guess it definitely showcases that they're not robots, unless they're like Terminators. You know what I mean? Like with
Yeah,
living tissue,
like cyborgs.
because he's burned alive, and you see the blood and the burnt
Yeah,
tissue and all that stuff.
and you hear him screaming "Master."
Right.
So I don't know. But here's the question, I guess. What's the fucking point? What is he like? He's on his. If he's just one man with a bunch of clones around him,
Yeah.
why is he doing this?
Well, I think all we know is that he's just obsessed with Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan fits into his plans
Yeah,
yet again.
I they're showing it to us as audience members for a purpose,
Yeah.
and it's not just that he's quirky. Like the only thing that really came to mind, and this is after having watched the episode and thought about it, is that he's using clones and he's recreating the experiment, albeit in a play. I think he maybe wants to create a clone of Manhattan
Yeah.
at some
Or
point.
maybe these are clones of them.
Yeah, if he had
already.
Osterman's DNA.
And the girl here is apparently in IMDb named after Marinette, I believe. That's
Oh,
like because you were telling me, right, that a
yeah. When
character
we
pops up
well, Marionette is a character in
in
the
Doomsday
Doomsday
Clock.
Clock,
Yes.
and there's a character in this show that
Yeah.
has that title card.
So
Um,
obviously, I feel like that's just maybe just like an Easter egg, and
yeah,
that's it. Nothing really connective.
hard to say.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't really know what else to make of Vite in these scenes.
it's
I
getting
want
it's better though than
it's
like
cool.
I
Yeah,
like it now.
yeah.
Like,
It's still progressing, even though they didn't answer any real questions other than the clone thing.
and it is definitely Vite. Because I saw an interview with Damon where he's basically saying that they kind of wanted to get ahead of this one because he's sometimes critiqued for kind of not revealing the answers soon enough.
Right.
So that's kind of why they went ahead and kind of said that's who he is before they're explicitly
Yeah.
saying
What
that.
if that's what they want you to think, though?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, same thing. He's also said that Dan Dryberg is not in this show.
But we know that Lori is.
Laurie is, yes.
So
Uh, and have you been keeping up with the PDpedia, I believe it's called, which are the files?
oh no, I didn't even know this was a thing.
Okay, I haven't read them either, but it's like the end of every book from the original Watchmen, where they kind of show newspaper clippings or files
Right.
or articles and stuff. So I think that's on the HBO American site. You can kind of find that link, but I believe it's called PDpedia for some reason.
Well, that's a bad name.
Yeah, well, I guess so. So I guess that's about it for the episode. No, then we go back to Angela and Will.
Right.
She confronts him again, wants more answers.
He-
She finds out that he escaped,
Yeah, he
bought some eggs.
got out of the handcuffs, went grocery shopping, and came back because
Yeah.
he has unfinished business with her.
So again, just what is going on with this guy? How is he capable of any of these things? We're just not showing them.
The thing is, we learn later in the episode that he's not working alone.
Yes.
So he had help in,
He says
in
he
these
has
things.
before he says he has friends in high places.
Yeah.
So during this scene in the bakery, she gets a phone call. And she gets the DNA tests, the results from the Greenwood Center, which basically tells her that the DNA is from Will Abar, which is basically her grandfather.
Yeah.
And that there is one other person out there as well that is related. So that's obviously going to play in later on. She's kind of in disbelief, doesn't even like mention anything to him about it, and just says, basically, I'm going to take you in now. Where
Right.
she initially she didn't want to, but now she is. And then, it's kind of a cool moment where she's lifted him out of the wheelchair and they're kind of embracing to a certain degree, right? Because they're family members and they have all this history that they're
Mhm.
completely unaware of. He definitely knows. She just learned. And then puts him in the car. And then the what the fuck moment happens, right?
Yeah,
Giant
it really
magnet
was.
drops down and attaches it to the top of the car. Basically, a UFO flying object above, which, at the time, I really wanted to think it was, the original Archie,
Mhm.
and maybe even Night Owl, in his old age,
Yeah,
kind of
maybe.
like how Silk Spectre is back.
That would actually kind of make sense if Dryberg, because at the end of the comic, they do mention that Dryberg and Lori
Mhm.
are going to be heroes. They're going to wear the mask again.
Yeah,
They're going
and
to
they change their
new,
names.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and we learn I think it's from the files, or maybe just the episodes later on, that Lori changed her name, right?
Yeah, Lori Blake.
Right. And even her vigilante name to the Comedienne,
Mhm.
which is very cool.
So, and if we're working off the theory that Will is the former Hooded Justice,
It would totally make sense.
it would make a lot of sense. Dryberg was working with the original Night Owl as well.
Yes. And they had their famous get-togethers, right? Every whatever night,
Right.
where they drank and talked about the old stories.
So I could see that. The ship itself looked
The way it
much
looked,
bigger.
yeah, the way it looked, definitely didn't make you think that it was, Archie tech at all.
Yeah. But I mean,
Uh,
this is 30 years in the future, so anything's possible.
And then so we get this cool kind of mirror shot where he's looking in the mirror at Angela and kind of gives a smirk. And then as soon as it lifts up, he kind of like dives to the side, I guess just bracing for the impact of that, kind of
Right.
lifting him up. And then we get a really cool kind of throwback to what Will's father, the pamphlet, the leaflet that he wrote, watch over the sun. She falls down her, she catches it, she looks at it,
Mhm.
and the episode ends.
Right. So I mean that leaflet itself, I think, is very important in terms of Will's worldview.
Oh, 100%. It's completely
His
changed his outlook on society.
distrust
Um,
of authority. I would say.
and and just based off the American Hero story, like and how violent Hooded Justice is,
Right.
it still makes me think that he could be that character.
Yeah, he had a lot of anger.
Yeah.
So here's a question though. So this magnet UFO thing,
Right.
whoever Will is working with, this is a third party now, right? So we had the cops. It was cops and robbers essentially. It was the cops and the bad guys, and it was
Hmm.
pretty clean. And Vite doing whatever Vite does. What this is something new. This is something that is connected to it all, but working in the background. What are the options? I guess there's not a lot right now. It's kind of open ended, but
Yeah. This is just another question. Do you believe that this third party was involved in the death of Crawford?
yes, it had to have been. I don't right now believe that Will has superpowers or on his own could have done that to Crawford. I think he had
Then
help.
why have that scene where he asked Angela, "Do you think I could lift 200 pounds?"
Yeah, it's foreshadowing.
And then um, uh, to kind of zoom in on the rope, right, from how it was at the bottom to this point, kind of how it could have been done
Yeah, like
from a
he's using
sitting position and using leverage
right.
and roping it up. But then also, we didn't mention Looking Glass when he kind of describes the murder. It's like a very vicious
Oh yeah, he suffered.
retailing of just kind of how it went down, right? Till the bitter end, he was alive through all the asphyxiations, and there was rope tissue under his nails. And then he even says that kind of that eerie line, right? He was alive until he wasn't.
Right.
And I don't believe that Will could be capable
So yeah,
of handling in that way unless he was Hooded Justice. If he can stand up out of that chair and
maybe.
muster up that strongman strength every now and that could be his
So those are
special,
the only options. Either he
yeah,
has help, which is clear that he
which
has
he
help
does.
to a
Yes,
degree,
yeah,
or he's hiding either superpowers or is like faking the wheelchair thing. Those are really the only options there that I can see. And I don't think that he's faking the wheelchair thing.
there could be something with those pills,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
it was a weird shot too, right? How it was kind of
very
like,
deliberate.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of blue lights around too. I don't know if you noticed in certain scenes, which I believe is trying to just invoke some sort
Manhattan.
of Doctor Manhattan presence, right? And he's
Mhm.
trying to showcase that maybe there's more Doctor Manhattan than we know.
Yeah, so that's something that kind of lends credence to the idea that he or other people could have superpowers
Hmm.
now. Is that this is a post Doctor Manhattan world where people are trying to recreate the experiment. They're trying to
Hmm.
recreate some of his powers. Vite's already trying to recreate certain
Yeah,
powers like the teleportation and blah blah blah.
and it's
And
not like all the powers we do know that he has, right? He can duplicate himself. He can go, giant. There could be an evolution of that, or just things we didn't know that he could do. Like there's,
yeah, why not? Like realistically, the thing with Doctor Manhattan is he can do anything. He can manipulate matter on a
yeah,
molecular level,
he's
so
a
he can
god.
make anything happen.
Yeah,
So I don't know why we all are assuming that he couldn't make himself look like a
yeah.
person. He can make his skin more or less blue.
Hmm.
There's only a few extra steps involved in
Yeah.
whatever else. So I think he could be. I don't think that Will is Doctor Manhattan,
No.
but I think that that's hinting at maybe he is on Earth and hiding and observing something along those lines. Again,
Yeah.
too many questions.
Not a bad. It's still early, right? This is
Yeah,
the second episode.
second episode.
Can't wait to see more. Sundays can't come soon enough, pretty much for me. And then I
Yeah.
know we're gonna have the same feeling though next Sunday. Like we'll get like a little bit, and then they'll pose even more questions.
Yeah, I mean it's an effective storytelling
Yeah.
technique. It keeps you wanting more, and it's the slow burn, and then by the end of the season, we're gonna look back and realize how crazy it was.
Right.
I'm looking forward to around episode 7, 8 when like now shit's hit the fan and now things are moving a bit quicker and there's some bigger revelations.
Yeah, you're right. I think 7, 8, 9 will be the big ones because I believe they gave episodes 1 to 6 to like a lot of outlets
Okay,
just to kind of review it in that capacity because they didn't want to just give the pilot to everybody and then everyone say, "Oh, you don't get enough answers," or "You don't know where this is going." They wanted to kind of jump ahead of that
right.
and give people a really good sense of what they're trying to craft here. We just get teased by it bit by bit until we get to 5, 6, but especially obviously 7,
Yeah,
7, 8, 9.
yeah, the big ones. Okay, I think that that'll do it for today. You follow us on all this stuff. Tower Babble is spelled with two or three total B's. Babble, like we're babbling right now, not the biblical babble. We're pretty Googleable, so Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, all that kind of stuff. Find us out there. Send any emails, questions, comments, concerns, that kind of stuff. TowerBabblePodcast@gmail.com.
Definitely send us questions, theories, whether you think we're just way off, just any of that stuff. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, there's a good chance that we are way off on at least some of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, great episode, and we'll see you guys next week.